I was lying in a hospital bed. Both of my legs were wrapped in bandages. There were tubes in my arms. The room smelled like medicine and cold air. My heart was beating on a monitor beside me, beep, 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 and every breath I took felt like a small miracle. I had just survived something that should have killed me. And I was thanking God. I was thinking about my grandchildren. I was thinking about how I still had so much love left to give. I was smiling, actually smiling despite the pain. Then the door opened. My wife of 31 years walked in. She was dressed nicely, hair combed, lipstick on. She didn't look like a woman coming to visit her husband in the ICU. She looked like a woman who had somewhere important to be afterward. She pulled a chair close to my bed. She sat down, she opened her handbag, and she placed a folded envelope on top of my blanket. "Sign it," she said. Her voice was calm, almost cold. I looked at her. Then I looked down at the envelope. "What is this, Farida?" "Divorce papers," she said. "I want a perfect man, not this." She gestured toward my bandaged legs with one hand, like they were furniture she didn't like. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I looked down at my legs. I thought about everything. 31 years, 3 children, 100,000 small sacrifices. And then I picked up the pen she had set beside the envelope. I signed. I looked up at her and I said very quietly, "Okay, now pay your own hospital bills." She blinked, and for just 1 second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. But she stood up, took the papers, and walked out of the room without looking back. That was the last time she saw me as her husband, but it was not the last time she saw me. My name is Salim. I am 63 years old. I was born in a small village in Punjab, the third son of a farmer who owned nothing but a half-acre of wheat land and more dignity than most rich men I've ever met. My father used to say, "Salim, a man's worth is not in his wallet. It is in how he sleeps at night." I never forgot that. I spent my whole life trying to be the kind of man who could sleep at night. When I was 19, I moved to the city. I started working at a textile factory, not as a manager, not as an engineer, as a floor worker, loading rolls of fabric onto machines. My hands bled in the first week. My back hurt every night, but I sent money home every month without fail. By the time I was 26, I had saved enough to open a small shop, just a modest fabric store in the old market. Nothing fancy, but it was mine, and I ran it with honesty every single day. Then I married Farida. Her family was from a slightly better background than mine. Her father had a government job. Her brothers wore pressed shirts and talked about things I barely understood at the time: investments, property, connections. But I was hardworking and I was honest, and her father respected that. He gave me his daughter's hand and said, "Salim, I trust you." I spent 31 years trying to honor that trust. We had 3 children. Our eldest son, Cameron, was the pride of our family. He got into engineering university on a scholarship. I cried when he got that letter. I cried like a child. I worked double shifts for 2 years to support him through his studies. He graduated. He got a good job in the city. He married a woman named Shazia, a sophisticated woman from a well-off family who wore expensive perfume and talked very fast. Our daughter, Nadia, was our middle child. She was gentle and quiet. She married young, moved to another city, and we didn't see her as often as I would have liked. But she called me every Sunday, without fail. Our youngest son, Bilal, was still finding his way at the time of this story. He was 27, working in a small software company, unmarried, a little lost, but a good heart. Always a good heart. I was proud of all of them. I thought we were a family. It was an ordinary Tuesday in October. I had closed the shop a little early because my knee was bothering me, an old injury that flared up in cold weather. I was walking to the bus stop when it happened. A speeding motorcycle jumped the curb. I don't remember the impact. 1 second I was walking, and the next I was on the ground, looking up at a gray sky, feeling nothing at all. Which, as the doctors later told me, was actually a bad sign. Feeling nothing meant the damage was serious. Both of my legs were badly broken. The left one had multiple fractures from the hip downward. The right one had nerve damage near the knee. I was rushed to the hospital. In an ambulance I didn't even hear coming. I woke up in the ICU 2 days later. My son Cameron was there. He was standing by the window, on his phone. When he saw my eyes open, he came closer. "Baba," he said, "you're awake? What happened to me?" I asked. My voice was like sand. He explained it. The accident, the surgeries. He spoke quickly, the way busy people speak when they have information to deliver. Then his phone buzzed and he looked at it. "I have to step out for a minute," he said. "Work call." He was gone for 40 minutes. That was the first small thing I noticed, but I said nothing. Farida arrived that evening. I was relieved to see her. She sat beside me for about 20 minutes, asked about my pain level, and then said she needed to get home because the house needed looking after. Of course, I said, go, I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. I was scared. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely scared. The doctors had told me that the nerve damage in my right leg was significant. They were not sure yet how much movement I would recover. There was a real possibility, they said gently, that I might not walk normally again. That night, alone in the ICU, I prayed. I asked God to give me patience. I asked for strength. And somewhere in that quiet, beeping darkness, I also made myself a promise. Whatever happens to my legs, I will not become a burden. I will not complain. I will not ask for anything I don't need. I had lived my whole life trying not to be a burden. I didn't know that the people I had sacrificed everything for were already deciding I was exactly that. Over the next week, I started to notice things. Cameron visited every second or third day. He never stayed long. There was always a meeting, a deadline, a thing that needed his attention. His wife Shazia visited once. She stood at the door of my room, smiled tightly, asked how I was feeling, and then said, "Cameron, we really should get going. We have that dinner." They left. Farida came more regularly, but something was different. She was distracted. She answered messages on her phone while sitting beside me. She talked a lot about money, the hospital bills, the surgery costs, what the insurance would and wouldn't cover. She said it in a worried tone at first, but slowly the tone changed. It started to sound more like accusation. "Your shop hasn't been open for 2 weeks," she said one afternoon. "The rent still has to be paid." "I know," I said. "Bilal said he would manage it for a while." "Bilal can barely manage himself." She snapped. I was quiet. Another day she said, "The doctors are saying you might need a walker, even after recovery." "Maybe," I said, "but I'll work on my exercises." A 63-year-old man with a walker, she said quietly, almost to herself. Like I wasn't there, I heard it. I said nothing. Then, one afternoon, I heard a conversation I was not meant to hear. The door to my room was half open. Farida and Cameron were just outside in the corridor, speaking in low voices. But the hospital was quiet and I could hear. Farida said, "How long is this going to go on? The bills are mounting." Cameron said, "The insurance will cover most of it. And after, he might not walk properly. Who takes care of him? I didn't sign up to be a nurse." A pause. Then Cameron, my son, my firstborn, said, "Shazia also thinks it would be difficult for him to stay with us long term. Our apartment isn't set up for." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I closed my eyes. I kept my face very still, and I did what I had done my whole life when things hurt me deeply. I said nothing, but inside I felt something shift, like a foundation that had seemed solid had just shown a crack that had always been there. I just hadn't looked closely enough before. 3 days after that conversation, Farida walked into my room. Dressed nicely, calm face, an envelope in her hand. You already know what happened next. But let me tell you what happened inside me in that moment. When she said, "I want a perfect man," I did not feel rage. I want to be honest with you, because this story is only worth telling if I'm honest. What I felt was something quieter and sadder than rage. It was recognition. Like when you've been suspicious of something for a long time, and finally, someone just confirms it to your face. I thought of the day I sold my father's watch to pay for Cameron's university textbooks. I thought of the winter I wore the same coat for 4 years, because every spare rupee was going into the children's school fees. I thought of all the times I came home tired, so tired that my bones ached, and I still cooked dinner because Farida had a headache. All the times I fixed things in the house at midnight because there was no money to call a repairman. All the times I said, "We'll manage," and then quietly, alone, figured out how to manage. I thought of all of that in about 3 seconds. And then I looked at my legs, my bandaged, broken, uncertain legs, and I thought, this is the moment. This is the test. My father used to say, "A man's worth is in how he sleeps at night." I picked up the pen. I signed, and then I said, as calmly as if I were discussing the weather, "Okay, now pay your own hospital bills." Her face changed. Just for a second. "What? The hospital bills?" I said, "They're in my name as my wife. They're partly your responsibility. But as my ex-wife." I paused. "That's a different matter." She stared at me. "You'll hear from the accounts department." I said, "You should probably contact a lawyer." She opened her mouth, closed it, took the papers and walked out. The door swung shut behind her. Beep, beep, beep. The monitor kept going. My heart kept beating, and I lay back against my pillow and looked at the ceiling for a long, long time. Now, this is the part of the story where I have to tell you something. Something that Farida did not know. Something that Cameron did not know. Something that, frankly, almost nobody knew because I had kept it private. The way I kept most important things private, quietly and without fuss. 3 months before the accident, I had sold my shop, but I had not sold it because I was struggling. I had sold it because I had received an offer I did not expect from a property developer who wanted the entire block of shops in the old market. He was building a commercial complex. My shop, which I had bought the property for 30 years ago for almost nothing, had increased in value enormously. The developer paid me a sum that, when I tell you the number, will explain everything that happens next. He paid me 47 million rupees. I know. I didn't believe it at first either. I had been sitting on valuable property for 30 years without realizing it. The old market had become prime commercial land as the city expanded around it. My little fabric shop, my humble beginning, had turned into something extraordinary. I had not told Farida. I had not told Cameron. I had not told anyone except one person, my lawyer, a quiet, trustworthy man named Mr. Hashim, who had handled my business affairs for 15 years. Why didn't I tell my family, honestly? I was going to. I was waiting for the right moment. I had been thinking about how to divide things sensibly, something for each child, some security for our old age, maybe a trip somewhere Farida had always wanted to go. Then the accident happened, and then, lying in that hospital bed, listening to my wife and son discuss whether I was too inconvenient to care for, I quietly made a different decision. I called Mr. Hashim from my hospital room. "The will need some adjustments." I told him, of course, he said. He asked no questions. That was why I trusted him. And here is the other thing nobody knew. The nerve damage in my right leg, the frightening diagnosis. the talk of walkers and limited mobility. The doctors had given me a follow-up assessment the morning before Farida walked in with envelope. The reassessment was positive, significantly more positive than the first prognosis. Mr. Salim, the young doctor had said, looking genuinely pleased, your nerve response is much better than we expected. With proper rehabilitation, we believe you will recover most, if not all, of your normal mobility. You may not even need a cane in 6 months. I had nodded. I had said thank you. I had not called Farida to tell her, because she had walked in 4 hours later with divorce papers. So let me be very clear about what she signed away. She signed away a healthy husband, or a husband who was going to be healthy again. She signed away a man who was not broken beyond use. She signed away 31 years of partnership, and she signed away any legal claim to 47 million rupees in assets that were entirely in my name. All for a perfect man. I hope he was worth it. I was discharged 6 weeks after the accident. Bilal came to pick me up. He was the only one who came. He had visited me every single day in the hospital, every single day, without exception. Sometimes he could only stay 30 minutes because of work, but he came. He brought me food from home because he knew I didn't like hospital meals. He sat with me in silence sometimes, which was exactly the right thing to do. He never once talked about money or inconvenience. When he arrived with the wheelchair to take me out, he looked nervous. Baba, he said carefully about the divorce. Mama told us, I want you to know, not today. I said gently, today we just go home. Where is home? He asked, and I could hear real worry in his voice. Your house, your and Mama's house. She's still there. Do you want me to find you a? I've already arranged something, I said. He looked surprised. I had, in fact, arranged something. Mr. Hashim had helped me purchase a small, comfortable apartment on the other side of the city, clean, quiet, close to a good hospital for my rehabilitation appointments. I moved in with nothing but a suitcase of clothes and a photograph of my 3 children when they were young. Bilal helped me unpack. He put the photograph on the shelf without me asking him to. Then he sat down across from me and said, Baba, what happened? Not the accident. I mean everything. What really happened to our family? I looked at my son. My youngest, still a little lost, but honest. Your brother and mother. I said slowly, decided that I was not valuable anymore. That happens sometimes. It's painful, but it is not the end of the story. I didn't think that, he said. His voice cracked a little. I never thought that. I know, I said. You are your grandfather's grandson. He cried a little. He wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed the way young men do. I pretended not to notice. Recovery was not easy. I will not pretend otherwise. There were mornings when the pain in my legs was significant enough to make me close my eyes and breathe through it for several minutes before getting up. There were days when the rehabilitation exercises frustrated me deeply. This body that had worked hard its whole life suddenly needing to be taught how to walk again, step by step, like a child. But I did it. Every day, I did it. My daughter Nadia called me every Sunday, as she always had. When I told her about the divorce gently, without drama, she went very quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Baba, I'm coming to see you. She drove 4 hours to visit me. She stayed for a week. She cooked for me. She sat with me in the evenings. She didn't say much about her mother, but one afternoon she said, I always feared this was how Mama saw things, Baba. I just hoped I was wrong. Don't be angry with her, I said. How can I not be? Nadia said, because anger is heavy, I said, and we've all been carrying enough heavy things. She hugged me for a long time. Meanwhile, across the city, Farida discovered something. The hospital accounts department had, as I mentioned, sent her a letter. She had been listed as next of kin and co-responsible party for certain bills during our marriage. After the divorce was finalized, her lawyer contacted Mr. Hashim regarding the division of marital assets. Mr. Hashim sent back a very polite, very detailed letter. It explained that I had no shared property with Farida. The house they lived in was in my name, and I had transferred it as a gift to Bilal 2 weeks after the divorce. It explained that my shop, the primary business asset, had been sold 3 months prior to the divorce. It explained that the proceeds of that sale, along with all other assets, had been organized in a manner consistent with my wishes. Farida called me. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again. Bilal told me with wide eyes that she had also called him, demanding to know what was going on. Bilal, to his credit, said simply, "Mama, you divorced him. His money is his business now." 4 months after I left the hospital, Cameron came to see me. I opened the door. I was standing without a cane. I had graduated from the walker 2 months ago, and from the cane 3 weeks ago. The doctor had used the word remarkable at my last appointment. Cameron looked at my standing figure for a moment with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Baba," he said, "you look good. Come in," I said. We sat in my small living room. He looked around at the apartment, modest, clean, warm. He noticed the photograph of the 3 of them on the shelf. He looked at it for a moment without saying anything. Then he began to talk. He talked for a long time. He talked about how difficult the past months had been, about Shazia's concerns, about the pressure of his job, about how he had not meant for things to go the way they did. He said he hoped I understood his position. I listened to all of it. When he finished, I said, "Do you remember what I told you on the day you left for university?" He thought for a moment. "You said, work hard." I said, "Work hard, be honest. And never forget where you came from." I paused. "Did you forget, Cameron?" He looked down. "I'm not angry with you," I said, "but I want to be honest with you, because you are my son, and you deserve honesty. You left me alone in that hospital. You let your mother walk in with divorce papers, and you said nothing. You discussed whether I was too inconvenient to care for. I heard you, Cameron, in the corridor." I heard everything. His face went pale. I didn't say anything that day. I said, not because I had nothing to say, but because some conversations need to wait until the right moment. This is the right moment. Baba, let me finish. My voice was calm. I worked every day of my life for this family. I never took a holiday in 30 years. I sold your grandfather's watch to buy your textbooks. I wore the same coat for 4 winters. And when I was lying broken in a hospital bed, you and your mother had a conversation about inconvenience. I looked at him steadily. That is what I needed you to know. The room was very quiet. Cameron's eyes were wet. "I'm sorry," he said. It came out thick, like it was difficult to say. "Baba, I'm sorry." "I know," I said, "but sorry is just a word, son. Let's see what you do with the rest of your life." Word travels in families. It always does. Word traveled that I had sold my shop for 47 million rupees. Word traveled that the house, the family home where Farida still lived, was now in Bilal's name. Word traveled that my will had been updated, and that the division of my estate was not what anyone had expected. And word traveled about my legs. This was the part that hit Farida the hardest. Bilal told me she had found out from the hospital. She had called to ask about some final billing matter, and the nurse, not knowing the situation, mentioned that my last follow-up had shown complete functional recovery. Complete functional recovery. Farida had divorced a man she thought was going to be a disabled, financially struggling burden. She had actually divorced a healthy, wealthy man who had quietly given away her house to her youngest son and left her name off of everything that mattered. She called me again. Many times. I answered once. "Salim," she said. Her voice was very different now, smaller. "Can we talk?" "We are talking," I said. "I mean, really talk, in person. I made a mistake. I was under a lot of stress. The bills, the uncertainty." "Farida," I said quietly, "do you remember what you said in the hospital? You said you wanted a perfect man." A long silence. "I hope you found one," I said. "Take care of yourself." I ended the call. I sat quietly for a few minutes. Then I got up on my own 2 legs. Without a cane, without a walker, without any help, and I made myself a cup of tea. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from Nadia, not a text message, not a phone call, a real letter, written by hand, in her careful handwriting that she got from me, because I always wrote in careful handwriting too. She wrote, "Baba, I have been thinking about you every day. I have been thinking about what you said, that anger is heavy, and we have all been carrying enough heavy things. I think I understand now why you were always so quiet when people hurt you. It was not weakness. It was the biggest strength I've ever seen. You stored up your dignity like other men store up money, and in the end, your account was full. I'm sorry for every time I didn't defend you loudly enough. I'm sorry for every time I thought it's not my business when it should have been. You deserved a daughter who fought for you. I will spend the rest of my life being that daughter. I love you, Baba. You're Nadia." I read it 3 times, then I folded it carefully and put it next to the photograph on the shelf. People ask me, or they would ask me, if this were a conversation, what I did with 47 million rupees. Let me tell you, I paid all of my hospital bills in full, every single rupee. I bought Bilal's apartment. I made the transfer official, so it was his completely. No complications. The boy needed a foundation. He had always been the one without a foundation. I set aside a sum for Nadia, for her children's education, delivered through a trust managed by Mr. Hashim. No conditions, no drama. Just a father taking care of his daughter the way fathers are supposed to. I donated a significant amount to a hospital rehabilitation center that had treated me during my recovery. The physiotherapist there, a kind young woman who never lost patience with a stubborn old man, got a letter from Mr. Hashim informing her that the center had received an anonymous donation sufficient to fund their equipment for 5 years. She called me in tears. I said I didn't know what she was talking about. And then, this part matters, I did something I had never done in my 63 years of life. I booked a trip, not a fancy trip, just a modest journey to see some of this country I had spent my whole life working in without ever properly seeing. I packed one suitcase. I got on a bus, then a train, then another bus. I visited the town where my father had farmed. I stood on the land. It belongs to someone else now, but it's still there, still wheat-colored in the afternoon light. I stood there for a long time. I think my father would have been pleased with me. 1 year after the accident, I gathered my 3 children for dinner. Cameron came with Shazia, who was quieter than usual, and looked at me with an expression that I can only describe as chastened. Nadia came and hugged me so long at the door that Bilal pretended to check his watch. Bilal had recently started dating a nice girl named Hira, who was bright and laughed easily. I hoped things worked out for them. We sat around a table in my modest apartment. I had cooked just simple things, dal, rice, a vegetable dish my mother used to make. Nothing impressive, but everyone cleaned their plates. After dinner, I looked around at my 3 children and I said, I want to say something, and then I never want to speak of the past again. Is that agreed? They nodded. Your grandfather used to say that a man's worth is in how he sleeps at night. I slept fine through all of it, the accident, the hospital, the papers, the recovery. I slept fine because I knew who I was. I always knew who I was. I paused. The question was whether you knew who I was. And I hope that you know now. Cameron said, We know, Baba. Good. I said, Then let's have dessert. Bilal burst out laughing, that nervous, relieved laugh that breaks tension like a window, and even Shazia smiled, and Nadia was crying a little. And I got up and brought out the kheer I had made, and we ate it together. It was, I think, the best dessert I have ever tasted. I know you want to know. Farida did not find her perfect man. She is living in a rented apartment now. The family home, as I mentioned, belongs to Bilal, who was kind enough to let her stay there for 6 months before she made alternative arrangements. She has her health. She has some savings. She is not in a desperate situation. She called me once more, about 8 months after the divorce. She said she wanted to apologize, properly. I listened. She talked for a long time. She talked about fear. Her fear when she saw me broken in that hospital bed. Her fear of a future that looked harder than she had expected. Her fear of aging without security. She wasn't making excuses, she said. She was just trying to explain. When she finished, I said, "I believe you were afraid, Farida." I was afraid too. I was lying in that bed, scared about my legs, scared about my life, scared about everything. But I didn't hand you papers, I held on. She was quiet for a very long time. I know. She finally said, "I know you did. I forgive you," I said, "not for your sake. For mine. I told you once that anger is heavy. I meant it. I don't want to carry yours." A pause. "But I can't come back. You should understand that." "I do," she said very quietly. "Take care of yourself," I said, and I meant it, genuinely, because hating her would have cost me something I wasn't willing to pay. I am 64 years old now. My legs work perfectly fine. I walk every morning 45 minutes, sometimes longer if the weather is good. My doctor calls me his star patient. I tell him I had good motivation. I run my days quietly. I read. I cook. I call Nadia every Sunday now. She calls me first, always, because she inherited my punctuality. I have dinner with Bilal once a week. Cameron visits once a month, and things between us are slowly, carefully repairing like a bone that was broken and is knitting back together. Not quite the same as before, but strong in new ways. And I sleep well at night. I sleep like a man who knows who he is. I've thought a lot about what this story means, what it's really about. It's not about money. The money was never the point. If I had been a poor man, I would have still signed those papers. I would have still said pay your own hospital bills. And I would have still walked out of that hospital with my dignity intact. It's not about revenge either. I want to be very clear about that. I didn't set out to punish anyone. I set out to survive with my self-respect whole. Whatever happened to the people who hurt me was simply a natural result of their own choices. This story is about worth. Real worth. Not the worth that is measured in how strong your legs are, or how thick your wall. It is, or how useful you are on any given day. The worth that comes from who you are when no one is watching. The worth that comes from a life lived with honesty and love and quiet endurance. Farida looked at me in that hospital bed and saw a broken thing, and in doing so, she revealed something important, not about me, but about herself. She had spent 31 years next to me and had learned to measure value in the wrong units. Cameron stood in a corridor and discussed his father's inconvenience, and in that moment he forgot something. He forgot that he was alive, educated, and standing in that corridor because of the man whose inconvenience he was calculating. He forgot that his foundation was built on someone else's sacrifice. He forgot where he came from. They both forgot. And then life gave them a very clear reminder. Here is what I want to say to you watching this. If you have an old parent, a humble parent, a quiet one who never shouts and never demands and just keeps showing up, look at them. Look carefully, because quiet people carry the most. Silent love is still love. An uncomplaining sacrifice is still a sacrifice. And a man who never brags about what he has given is not a man who has given nothing. He may be the one who has given everything. Treat the people you love as if they matter when they are standing. Not when they are broken. Not when they are gone. Right now, today. Because someday you will stand in a room without them, and you will remember every small cruelty, every dismissive word, every moment you checked your phone instead of holding their hand, and you will want to go back. You can't go back, but you can start today. Start today.